Hiring Happenings is the new podcast from Recruiting Gym, bringing you hiring news every month with a pestle twist.
Sponsored by Monster.
Hello and welcome to the 9th edition of Hiring Happenings with a pestle twist. This is our monthly podcast where we get to delve deep into a topic that's linked to pestle: political, economical, sociological, technological, legislative and environmental. And this month we're global, it's sociological. I'm Angela Cripps, the MD of the Recruiting Gym. We've got two amazing guests with us today: Cecilia Crossley from Babies with Love and Dan Cohen from Mixxyl. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves in a second, but actually let me tell you why I invited them. So Cecilia I met at the beginning of the year, and she was going off on a trip in September. We're going to hear more about that in a moment. But let me just read a little bit of information about her. She's an ambassador for the Meaningful Business 100, an annual celebration of 100 individuals globally who are using business influence to help move humanity closer towards UN Sustainable Development Goals. They're championing the coexistence of planet, people, purpose, alongside profit. So let's hear a little bit more from her. Cecilia, why did you say yes to a sociological podcast?
Thank you, Angela, and hi, Dan. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. I'm the founder of a social enterprise. So the word social is literally in what I do. From Babies with Love believes that every child should be safe, loved and learning. And we donate 100% of our profits to help achieve that vision. And we do that by providing services for the HR profession. So we'll get into a bit more what that is. But may I just finish that quick intro by just saying how brilliant it is that you're using this pestle framework to share cutting edge thinking with your audience, Angela. I absolutely love it. So yeah, congrats to you. It really warms my heart that this broad global thinking is being shared, and the opportunity to reflect on it as part of the work of the recruiting world. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. It's something I always enjoyed as a consultant, doing my pestle analysis. And from the work that we do with companies, we realise people don't do it anymore. So we thought, okay, well, let's not give them extra work because they're busy enough as it is. Let's do it for them. Let's give them a podcast they can listen to promote those big thinking ideas that they can then utilise. So we'll be relating it back to what it actually means for recruiters and HR people around the world. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Oh, let's get on to Dan. So Dan helps talent professionals leverage DEI data to create diverse, high performance teams. He's ex-Grubhub, Bullhorn, Broadbean. You'll know all these names if you've been in the recruitment industry. So Dan, why did you say yes?
Thanks, Angela. Lovely to be here. Thanks, Cecilia, as well. Look, I think, for me as someone, as you rightly say, I've very much had a background in recruitment since the late 90s, recruitment tech, but always been kind of more of someone who wants to do things for good, I think. And a bit like Cecilia, this is the first time that I've had the opportunity in my life where I am selling a tech solution, but is able to kind of create a bit more towards society and doing for good, which has been an amazing experience so far. We've been going for about, hard launched about 13 months ago now, all going really well. And obviously what we're trying to do is to improve the level of diversity for recruiters and for businesses. And more importantly than that is to try and create opportunity for underrepresented groups. And we're doing that through technology, and it's kind of a perfect storm for me, for someone who has been in tech for a long time, been in recruitment, and people built out diverse teams across the UK and the US. So kind of being able to do that all rounds it up nicely. And obviously with your podcast that I know was on before a couple of months ago, thank you. It's great to be here again. And again, like Cecilia says, taking that kind of pestle analysis is excellent in what we're trying to do. We're trying to kind of maybe humanize what we do and all the other amazing tech solutions out there to kind of make the world a bit of a better place. So we're really great to be here. Thank you.
If everyone was like Dan, the world would be such a better place, wouldn't it? So So we're talking about global. I think I've worked in about 25 countries around the world, and yourself, like you've said, Cecilia, you've literally just flown in from the US. So do you just want to share what you were doing over there first and foremost?
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Yeah, the timing of this episode is fantastic because it's just been UNGA week, which stands for UN General Assembly. Keir Starmer's been over, for example. It's made the papers here, which is great, as have many presidents and prime ministers and senior officials from the world's governments. And they've been doing what they definitely need to do, of course, in the UN. And alongside that, timed to go inside, it's UN Global Goals Week, it's UN Climate Week. So New York is absolutely packed with change makers. Change makers from, NGOs and the third sector that you might think of when I say that word, change makers, but actually so many senior business professionals looking to harness their businesses to consider purpose and impact and the role they have in society, alongside being highly profitable, absolutely commercial for-profit, successful businesses, but achieving that profit and that competitive advantage through the impact that they're, net positive impact, I should say, they're creating in society. And I spend my time there with chief HR officers who are thinking about, well, what does that mean for their people strategy and their competitive advantage in attracting, engaging, and retaining talent. So I think it's really pertinent for the recruitment world to have these themes and influences on the talent market today in mind when designing their recruitment processes and how they go about that job. So yeah, hot off the press from New York.
Fantastic. So we're going to get snippets of that, and certainly from your from our conversation when we first met, one of my passions is one of yours, which is around onboarding people, whether that's when they're new starters, but also then the onboarding when they come back from work, which was the From Babies with Love piece, which is your company. So talk to us about what's happening at the moment, sort of globally, and what's important in that field.
Great, thank you. I've got three kind of key themes that I thought to share today. And just to take a step back, I've introduced From Babies with Love. How is it we've come to think about onboarding and recruitment as part of our work? And From Babies with Love began with a service for global HR functions in the space of parental leave, you can guess from our name. And it was transforming a practice that we saw all over the place that just hadn't been thought about for a long time. And it was totally unstrategic and totally inconsistent and completely uninclusive. And I'm sure lots of people listening recognize it. Dan, it's probably familiar to you too in your inclusion world, which is a bunch of flowers that may or may not be sent to somebody taking parental leave, kind of depending on who the EA is or the line manager, or not, perhaps, and possibly whether or not they're a woman taking a traditional mat leave. We thought, what other employee communication is left like that? And it's just not. It's nonsense, really, when you think of it. So we created a parental leave gift service that little onesie, little blankets, the traditional kind of items. But the important bit is the message that comes with, dear so-and-so, many congratulations on the arrival of your baby. This gift for you is also empowering a vulnerable child to grow up in a loving family home. With best wishes, Chief People Officer at your company. And you can imagine the heartfelt reaction that comes from embedding impact. So you're celebrated, and at the same time, someone less fortunate is receiving support as well. So our clients started asking us to do the same at onboarding. Imagine for, say, a cohort of new grads or somebody coming back from extended leave, welcome treats, this time perhaps a notebook, a pen, the lanyard, the coffee cup, the kind of merch. But at the same point, we transform that merch by embedding impact, and that moment of communication in the employee journey becomes so heartfelt, meaningful, memorable, water cooler moment, LinkedIn posts, the EVP and talent attraction teams love it. And here the message would be something like, welcome to the recruiting gym, let's say. These welcome treats for you are also funding education for a vulnerable child so that they can look to a bright future too. with best wishes, Chief People Officer, and so on. So that's the background. That's how we came to be immersed in this world. And from that, learning about the many ways that the HR profession is driving positive social and environmental change. And I absolutely include the inclusion professionals in that thinking, Dan, just to connect in with your work. We created a podcast called How HR Leaders Change the World. And we're on, I think it's episode 163 next week. So that's how many CHROs I've been listening to for years now talk about the S, well, the P, the E, the PESTLE and the ESG, the whole thing. It's been it's been a privilege. And the three themes that I share with you today are kind of me synthesizing those CHROs' voices, so you don't have to necessarily listen to all the episodes in the catalogue. So the three I thought to share are on multiple generations in the workplace, time as a DE&I tool, and social mobility. You touched on that already, Angela. So I've got a few kind of references, so I'm going to look down at my notes while I do that, and Angela's going to kindly include the links in the show notes, I believe. So as I look down, please forgive me that I'm not looking to camera. But the first, multiple generations, that's been a huge demographic shift, thinking of that S in the PESTLE. And, people are retiring. The retirement age is going up. We see that in UK law. This is global, and that's been changing around the world too. And the wishes, preferences, demands of the younger generations, all generations actually, thinking post-pandemic. But I think what we hear about in the headlines is the millennials and the Gen Zs, and what their expectations of work are, and how they make their choices when they're choosing to accept an offer. I'm sure many of you have come across Deloitte's annual survey, the Millennial and Gen Z survey, and a statistic I've picked from that speaks to the trend of how younger generations are making choices about where they work based on the purpose of an organisation and societal impacts. So this is the 2024 Gen Z and Millennial survey, which, as I said, can put the link in the show notes for everybody to get more detail if they'd like it. But it's 75% that they found, this is a global study, of Gen Z and millennials say that societal impact is important when considering an employer's offer. So
that blew my mind, 75%, when I heard that stat. I thought that can't be, but I've heard it so many times now, and obviously it's been proven. That's just phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's a huge shift in, I would say, even 10 years. Like, even if we go back 15 years, I couldn't think of a business that had a purpose 15 years ago. And now what we're seeing, and again, this is so pertinent to last week in New York, businesses are mapping their business strategy to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Just on that language, in Europe, we commonly say the Sustainable Development Goals. In the US, they're commonly referred to as the global goals. It's kind of interchangeable. So depending on where you are as a listener, one of those will be quite familiar to you. And again, we can put the link to what those 17 goals are in the show notes. They're beautiful. They're big, colourful tiles. There's 17 of them. They cover all elements of the PESTLE, absolutely social. They also cover the E, the S, and the G if you're working or have clients who are, say, listed companies and maybe reporting on their own societal purpose and impacts using the ESG framework. It's all kind of different language, different ways of cutting the pie, if you ask me, but they are the world's purpose statement, the world's to-do list, if you like. They exist to enable all people and planet to thrive.
I love that to-do list. I think that's a really easy way to look at it. And we did actually do a whole week on this in the daily workout. So I'll put the links in there as well. We went through all 17. So that would be fantastic. Thank you.
So in terms of cutting edge recruitment, what does this mean for recruiters? I was Googling in preparation, for this recording, who are the latest companies that are, I just put it in, companies recruiting with SDG references in their recruitment packs. I mean, it's so cutting edge, in my opinion. And if anybody has seen anything really, really, that you consider best practice, please do DM me on LinkedIn, because I'm looking for it and I would absolutely love to see it, because I don't think it's a norm yet. I think companies are showcasing which sustainable development goals their business purpose, their business strategy is connecting to. And one I found, just to see what was latest in preparation, was McDonald's. So they're not even the companies that you might think might be at the cutting edge of this work. But you can find that information on their website. And the recruiters and talent attraction teams that I see are at the absolute cutting edge of showcasing EVP and purpose to the talent market, or those are actually putting it in role descriptions and recruitment packs. Those beautiful tiles that visually connect and immediately stand out, say in particular to the millennial and Gen Z cohorts of talent. I think they're putting their best foot forward when they do that.
What I'd like to do here is to bring Dan in with regards to that topic and then come back to those, because we're talking about differences here. Dan, this is your world, isn't it? The DEI side. So what's happening globally with regards to DEI and those trends?
Yeah, thanks, Cecilia. It's really interesting points and framework there. I think it's I don't want to be the cynical one here, but I think that there's plenty of buy-in from HRDs, CHROs to ensure that they're fully kind of aware of the different needs, wants, demands with regards to 3-4 different generations or whatever it is in a company. And we've seen a lot of this with regards to some of the data that we have as well. So some of our clients are using our kind of survey tool, they're putting it out to some of the candidate base. And what is kind of quite obvious for maybe my generation, I'm probably a little bit older than both of you, but is that the needs, wants and demands is very much different from someone who's mid-40s to those kind of obviously younger generations coming in. And to Cecilia's point, it's very much more about being able to bring my authentic self to work, having a bit more of an open culture, flexibility in the workplace, and all the kind of other inclusion and belonging strategies that I might be putting out there on my job post to kind of start to ensure that I'm capturing some of those younger applicants as they come through. However, this is the cynical side, is that a lot of those kind of tactics, when you actually end up at the office and you've been working at a company for 6 to 12 months, everything maybe seems like you were kind of sold on. And I think that is a really big issue at the moment. So we've seen a lot of turnover from younger generations. I was speaking to a friend of mine about 2 weeks ago who, I won't mention who or what company she's at, but she left a really successful business to go and work with a kind of startup that had about 20 people. So maybe more of a scale up, looking after all of their AM and customer service side. And to her, I think the person in question is maybe around 26, 27. The social impact and responsibility of what the company said that they were going to do wasn't delivered within the first 12 months she was there. It wasn't even close. So I think it's really great that there are more and more businesses that are looking to attract younger generations and ensure that what they're looking for, they can provide. Angela, you're a recruiter like me from years back. It was a good salary, it was good commission, it was car, it was phone, it was the things that don't really matter, right? The materialistic things. And it's now the younger generations that actually want to have that level of belonging. And to what Cecilia said about ensuring that business is doing good and has got that social impact. And we see that today, there's more and more investment funds that are popping up all around social impact and trying to do good. So I think the intention is there. I've still questioned some of the execution, if I'm being honest. And I'm not, there's no blame here, because to get this stuff right, it is so difficult to do. And ultimately, you do need to take a bit more of a data-led approach. But the problem is understanding and communicating with staff and new joiners and, ensuring that you're going through the right onboarding processes to make sure that person feels that there's a level of belonging in the first maybe kind of, 90 days. And Cecilia's right. It's the little details that kind of make all the difference, right? Ensuring that the desk is ready and the laptop's there and HR know what's going on. You also have to look at things that maybe are a bit more personal, right? Like tour of the premises maybe, or a 30 or 60 day check-in, or kind of like assigning a onboarding buddy or someone who's going to kind of show you the ropes and take you through these things. Now, this all seems really obvious, and I'm sure there are companies out there that do it, but there are so many that don't. And I've been there myself in situations where I've joined a new business and kind of been thrown in at the deep end, managed to kind of, it's a sink or swim sort of thing, managed to just get my head above water, fine. But, you know, when you look at that behavior at scale, that's when you get all of that churn, all of that staff churn starts coming through. You know, 2 or 3 people start bad-mouthing a business, stuff ends up on Glassdoor or review sites, you know, and then suddenly it's like, oh, we put all this time and effort in and we actually haven't made any progress. So I think that the intention is there, but I think the execution needs a lot more work. Sorry.
Well, no, I totally agree with you, because as Cecilia was talking, and especially about the 17 tiles in the documents, what was going through my head is, yes, but are they following through on it? Are they actually doing it? So let's come back to you, Cecilia, then. We're still on that onboarding and what people can be doing. So let's pick up on your other points.
Yeah, there was, just to finish on that first one, there was a report by PwC that showed that 79% of managers advocated for their business's purpose and understood the benefits commercially of having one. But, do you know, I forgot now, but it was like 30-something% then said that they had embedded that in their teams. So I think it's absolutely right. There is a gap in like the evolution of the sophistication of how businesses are articulating and acting on, you know, what is the point of their business in society, that people are just kind of starting to work on. The phase so far perhaps has been, you know, moving from, oh yes, we have a business purpose, it's this page on our website, to actually how does that show up in my daily to-do list? That's where the world needs to get to next, and I think that is a work in progress to build on what Dan was saying.
That's what you're helping people with, isn't it? I mean, that's where people have come to you and gone, help.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure the momentum will continue, and isn't that brilliant? To be optimistic about that, we have to be.
To do something to start with is great, but yeah, let's follow it through. Let's not just have it as a page.
No, but so there's the healthy cynicism. I hear you loud and clear as well.
I'm generally a very positive, optimistic guy. I really am. By the way, I'm not. I generally keep things half full, but.
Sure, no, but the first stage of change in change management is a burning platform, isn't it? So we have to have that showing what's not there yet to start with, I'd say. But yes, time as a DE&I tool is the second theme I thought to talk about in terms of what that means for recruiters, because what comes up on the How HR Leaders podcast in many ways is you know, and fast forwarded by the pandemic, we all know that now, is what is attracting people to jobs. To speak to Dan's point, it's not always the things that were that it used to be, and some of the factors, such as is it a competitive remuneration package, are kind of the hygiene factors now, and the ability to competitively attract is actually around flexible working, and certainly the ability to attract a diverse workforce absolutely is around flexible working. And I think the fallout of hybrid is still happening. In the US, as I say, I've just come back from there, there's definitely pressures on bums on seats, if I may just use the word bum on your podcast, Angela, but that's
terminology in recruitment all the time. Bums on seats.
It was butts on seats in the US. It wasn't bums, yeah. But that definitely came up, and I think there's an element of the tech company and the tech sector there that's allowed voice here in Europe too, of course, but obviously in the US. And so I think how hybrid settles is a live topic. I think it hugely relates to the S in PESTLE because of the interplay between flexibility and people with responsibilities outside of work wanting to work and being able to also fulfill their personal responsibilities, whatever they might be. I think it hugely interplays with facets of diversity, and again, people that are wanting to work and contribute a huge amount professionally, but might have needs that are different to being able to commute and do a 9 to 5 and commute back again. And a really recent topic that I'm seeing a lot in consideration of that is companies becoming certified menopause friendly companies, and the using that as a tool, as a talent attraction tool for women in midlife of their careers, and showcasing that in their talent attraction pages, in their EVP proposition on their website and on their socials. As probably the newest topic that I'm seeing really picked up. But of course, as I say, that how hybrid settles and coming out of the pandemic is absolutely still live and a hot topic there, I'd say. So I think it's really important to think about for recruiters in consulting with their clients on, well, what does your proposition look like? What is this job spec offering in terms of those inclusion factors and how they relate to flexible working?
I'm so glad you brought menopause up there. I'm actually sitting about thinking about putting my fan on at the moment, but we've got Menopause Week coming up in October here in the UK, and we've been working on this for the last 4 years. So there is a Menopause in Your Business free course in the Recruiting Gym. We'll get that link in there as well, that talks about everything all around it, including the legal elements, what's going on in governments, what is happening around the world, and where people are leading the way. And I'm glad to say the UK is leading the way. It doesn't say much, but we are leading the way with regards to that. So thank you for bringing that up as well. And your third point?
Social mobility comes up all the time on the podcast, and you mentioned it at the outset as well, Angela, for us to talk about. And I think, again, the opportunity for talent attraction and through onboarding and therefore impacting the recruitment world as well, it's such a wonderful lever to play because of how inclusive companies can be in the pools of talent that they seek to attract new colleagues from, and where companies go to recruit. And I find that many of the CHROs that come on the podcast, particularly in, well, as an example, it would be the hospitality sector. So Neil Morrison, for example, when he was Chief People Officer at Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, for UK and Ireland, he really spoke about how he sees his work as, a role for enabling people that may face barriers to employment to get their first step in the employment in their career ladder. And they had all sorts of wonderful puns around chicken that I'm not going to remember now, but it was like, you can imagine the little chicks coming on, things like that in the episode. If anybody listens, you'll smile as you hear them. But it was just that perhaps are there roles that you're recruiting for that don't require a degree, that do offer people, from very early stages in their career to take that first step? And how can you encourage your clients to see that as an advantage in their talent strategies through apprenticeship schemes, perhaps access the resource that the government gives if they don't already have that, or go beyond with kind of pre-employability programs that encourage diverse attraction and encourage social mobility in society, back to the S. And there's one other episode or thought that I'd just like to share on that, which is then perhaps how your clients capturing data and measuring. It'd be interesting to see, Dan, if you're seeing that as well. I found KPMG was one of the leaders. The Chief People Officer there speaks about what did they do to start capturing data on the socioeconomic facet of people's diverse, who we are and where we come from, and then how are they using over time the data that they're capturing to see how people are moving through roles in their organization to result in the socioeconomic diversity that they want at their senior levels of their firm. So that data capture, I think, is also a fascinating element of what companies are doing in social mobility.
Well, Dan, this is your world, isn't it? So over to you then with regards to all of that.
Yeah, Cecilia, thanks so much. So many brilliant points in there and brilliantly put as well. And this is a topic that is extremely close to my heart. I was, I guess, from a kind of poor background growing up in East London. Pretty tough, but okay now as kind of where we are and what we're doing. But I've got a lot of lived experience of this on being on that side of the coin, and also being on the other side of the coin and being able to offer opportunity to people that I've met. And I've got multiple examples who I shan't name, but when I was at Broadbean, when I was at Grubhub, when I was at Bullhorn, it was really just kind of, for me personally, during the kind of social world that we lived in. And again, Angela, you'll know kind of some of that, parting with recruiters and going out quite a lot and being quite a generally social chap. Not so much nowadays, that's for sure. I've slowed immensely. But just kind of meeting new people and talking to them and about the business and what we're doing and kind of what that world looks like. I managed to find multiple people to come and work with at Broadbean and the team. I appreciate, to your point, Cecilia, there are certain roles out. These were very much kind of commercial and sales-based roles, right? So, it's very difficult to do this in certain professions. But just to kind of speak to these people, invite people in for an interview, have a conversation with them and find out a bit more about them and their background and what they've done and what they're looking to do. And I've found that when I've engaged with certain people, that there's just a different level of ambition and hunger and passion than there is from maybe some of the kind of more red brick universities, Oxbridge. And I've got no issue saying that out loud because that's my experience. That's what I've seen. And I'm sure that there's other people out there that can kind of mirror that as well. And once you give opportunities to people that have never had them before, you kind of get paid back tenfold. And some of the people I've worked with, when I hired them when they were maybe 16, 17, we did apprenticeship schemes, we did paid apprenticeship schemes, and now at the very top levels of some of the biggest recruitment tech businesses and tech businesses in the country. And, I look at them today and I get kind of goosebumps, and I have an extremely proud feeling of being able to see someone rise through the ranks from an absolute kind of chance encounter at the pub or at five-a-side football, whatever it is, and getting someone onto a different track in life and seeing the results. So I'm massively passionate about this, and touch wood, as we grow and as we scale Mixxyl, we will be looking to look at different talent pools from what everyone else is looking at. And I've spent a lot of time, to be fair, up until COVID, I did a lot of work with Young Enterprise. And we went to schools in London and in South London, and we used to do like mock interview days, and we used to do Dragon's Den days. And the Dragon's Den days were amazing. You have all the kids on stage presenting their idea. I mean, the ideas were ludicrous, and there was one kid who was like adamant he was going to invent a teleport, right? So fine, let's roll with it. And you had all the parents behind you, and it was the most amazing experience. And they come and they do their pitches, and we'd obviously give very constructive, positive feedback. But then what shocked me the most was the networking afterwards. And there were so many kids that would come up to you and say, look, I'm sitting, they're around sort of 16 years old, these kids just kind of finishing school. And they didn't really know what was next, right? They didn't know how to get a job. They didn't know how to apply for a job. They didn't know what industry they might want to look at. Some of them were going into, upper school. Some of them maybe at 18 might have been going to university. Some weren't. And I think that there's a massive, massive gap in our syllabus and our education syllabus that kind of talks about how people can get work and how they can get jobs. And I remember when I was a kid, when I was 16, we had this survey that we did on like this old BBC computer, whatever. And I think that like 40% of our year were told that it was their occupation they should go into was being a midwife, right? And it was just like, okay, that's kind of strange. But so, that stuff maybe didn't work back then properly as it should do. But today, with where we are and what we've got and the technology that's out there, I really think that there's time that we should make room on the syllabus for this. To your point, Cecilia, about some of the data, it's difficult to collect sometimes because there's always a reluctance to kind of self-identify from poor economic backgrounds, right? So that might be, asking questions around what your parents did, what school you attended, whether you had like free school meal eligibility, like, these are really up close and personal questions, and there's no surprise that people aren't keen to kind of answer them unless there's an environment where it's a kind of completely anonymous survey that where you can't be identified, and therefore you've got the confidence to talk about your background and upbringing. And a lot of people don't like to do it, and I totally get that. But ultimately, the only way we can actually start to move this again at scale is by looking at the data, but we have to provide the right environment for people to answer those questions.
It reminds me of that video where we can see that we can all help. It's the one where you've got the teacher's taken a load of students out into a park. He's lined them all up, and there's probably about 30 of them, his class, and then he asks them all to take a step forward with each of those questions. So whether they still have two parents, or whether their parents are still together, whether they had to worry about where the next meal was coming from, whether they had to work while they were going through school. And you saw the people stepping forward with all those positives. And then some kids still on the line. They've not had any opportunities in life. And none of these were down to the individual. None of them were down to their skills, their personalities, their attitude. It was all about circumstance. Yeah. So I will put the link to that, and we'll put that video in, because it's so powerful to see the differences where people don't necessarily get those opportunities. And that's why I love recruitment so much, because as part of our onboarding program that we do with companies, we start with those career plans. Yeah, what is it? Where are the opportunities? And even those companies that have got 5, 10 people, you can still have 13 levels. We've got career plans for 13 levels, coming in at a trainee and working your way through, and all of the different opportunities just on one career path. It doesn't even have to be going off on different elements, just as a recruiter. And actually, we're talking about it a lot this week. This will be coming out for October, but this week's where Kamala Harris has been speaking up about her starting in McDonald's and doing that at university. So if you can do the fries at McDonald's and potentially end up as the president of the United States and the leader of the free world, that's not bad social mobility, is it? Opportunities then, things that people are getting, and what I do want to bring into this, because it is very different globally all around the world, is the maternity and the paternity rights. We've got changes going on here in the UK around ours at the moment. We'll have legislation on the L in 2 months' time. But Cecilia, what's your input on this?
Yeah, thank you. And this really comes from the origin of From Babies with Love's work, as I shared at the beginning with that parental leave gift service. And as we grew that, serving so many companies globally, it gave us incredible insight into the other initiatives and tools that companies are putting in place to build family-friendly workplaces. And that is sometimes driven by legislation, but quite often it moves ahead of legislation in order for those companies to have a competitive advantage in their talent attraction strategies. So just to take a step back and think, well, why? Why is that legislation, or indeed any company's own initiative, happening? It's because of demographic drivers. So thinking of the S in PESTLE, I mean, the average age, I'm going to use the UK as an example. This is different in different countries around the world, but the UK example, coming from the Office of National Statistics, is that a woman is now 30.9 years old when she has her first child, and a man is 33.7 years old. And the graph, if you look on the ONS, I hope I'm doing this the right way for the camera, it's getting older and older.
We talked about it in March on the UK version, and it was 29 something there. So even in that short period of time, 6 months, it's gone up.
There's also gender balance targets from the clients. That's probably all of our listeners are serving. Over the years, that's been demonstrated quantitatively. It's not just the right thing to do. The big consultancy companies have been showing that gender balance boards equals more profit. I'm being really crude there, forgive me, but there are plenty of those studies available now. Meaning so many companies around the world have targets, and of course attrition, that is a key driver of imbalance at senior levels, is attrition of working parents, and historically that means women not returning from parental leave. So I think that sets the frame of why is legislation happening, where are the drivers all coming from. And there is a lot happening in the UK. You've covered it already, I think, but we have a cutting edge guide that we put out annually. And again, Angela, probably useful for the link to go in the show notes. Yeah. A guide on what the latest family friendly policy and practices are And this does cover latest legislation. So to share one that's tiny for the moment, this is a UK one. It's the Neonatal Care Act that comes into force from the 1st of January. So if you haven't looked at that already for your own organisation, have a quick look to see how it might impact you. And there are other, that's quite a niche specialist piece of legislation impacting family-friendly workplaces. But with these demographic drivers, they're impacting more and more people and becoming legislation. But there's just one more I thought to share of actually, which is a bigger trend, and it's hot off the press as well. You may have seen it on LinkedIn, Dan. I bet you did. A group called the Dad Shift. They're just a group of peers from different organisations that have come together to lobby for legislation to equalise, or certainly move towards equalisation, paternity and maternity leave here in the UK. And the Dad Shift, I think it was the week before last, this fabulous campaign, so clever. They work with a lady who's just super creative, and they put slings with toy babies in them on some of the statues in and around London of super famous people. And the two I can remember off the top of my head, one was Fred Astaire. He's on a statue on a lamppost with an umbrella dancing in the rain, and he's got a baby in a sling on. And the other I can remember is Thierry Henry outside the Emirates statement. He's doing this kind of, I don't know, my sons do it, this kind of yay, celebrating a goal kind of. I think my youngest Sam calls it the Sui movement. I think Ronaldo does it. Anyway, so he's doing that action. Lots of listeners probably know what it is and use proper words and the words I just used. But again, with a baby on the sling. And it was all over. I mean, maybe my LinkedIn's an echo chamber, but it was flooded. And it was so creative and so clever. And there's an open letter to Keir Starmer at the moment that the Dad Shift is promoting that we can go and sign. So it's always moving, is my point, and there's a lot happening. But in the recruitment world, I bet many of your clients are moving ahead of what that legislation is. So in the Cutting Edge Guide, we cover 5 themes in this space, and they range from gender inclusive policy to grandparents at work, which I think is the most cutting edge of all of them. And they include just quick summaries of the legislation with the links, like a library, to save everybody searching and spending hours doing the desk-based work. We're just trying to save everybody time and make it really easy. And then where you might see, or internally in your own organisations, you might be wanting policies. Don't start from scratch. People have already done those policies. And again, let's save time and make it easy, because we're all working on the same objectives of, what we want family-friendly workplaces to be, and of course, complying with legislation. So in the 2024 guide, there are case studies behind the scenes. What were they trying to do? Why? What did they learn? What might be easier next time, and therefore what might they recommend to you? From the Lego Group, M&G PLC, and Standard Chartered.
I just want to share this. I'll put the link in there for people to go in more detail, but it certainly shocked me. So if you knew about it, well done. But Sweden give 480 days parental leave. Just imagine that, 480 days, of which they are paid 80% of their regular wages. So just in comparison, here in the UK, it's 90% for 6 weeks, and then it's statutory maternity pay for 33 weeks, which is 175 quid, something like that, a week. So this is phenomenal. But even better, if there's multiple births, so if for every additional child, if you have twins, if you have triplets, they give another 180 days. So they're helping with regards to that. Plus, it's 240 per parent. So they can split it for maternity and paternity. And fathers get 90 paid paternity days of those 480 reserved just for them to promote father-child. So although they can split it between them, 90 do have to go to the father. I mean, that's just phenomenal. I think that's amazing. And there's the list of all the best countries in there. We are nowhere near that. So I wanted to highlight that for everyone in there. Dan, did you have any further comments on that?
I've always kind of thought to myself that the amount of paternity leave was kind of ridiculous. I've never really understood it, if I'm being honest. So I look at we discussed some of the stats from the Nordics last week, Angela. And they're absolutely leading the way on this stuff. And I really don't see any reason why we can't, I appreciate that it takes time to get to those levels. But to either think about kind of maybe sharing some more, increasing the mat leave that some of the fathers can take out there, I think is the biggest no-brainer in history. And the fact that it's 2 weeks at the moment is just ridiculous, in my opinion. But these things take time, right? So we're not going to get to Sweden levels, but I absolutely think that there should be a bit more legislation in there to make sure that there is enough time, right? And again, if we could get to anywhere between like 8% of salary would be amazing. But again, that's probably going to take a number of years to get to. But I think we should look at this as a country. And obviously, Cecilia, it sounds like you're kind of obviously promoting that. I didn't see Dad Shift, but it sounds brilliant. I'll have a good look at that. With Thierry Henry and Ronaldo, all that kind of, that's a really good idea to kind of do and start another movement to kind of get a bit more parity around this. And, a lot of that stuff as well, to your point, Angela, it falls into those inclusion and belonging strategies, right? And kind of creating that environment that people, if they want to have a baby, that they understand that work's going to be supportive. And look, businesses can still go and do it themselves, right? It's nothing stop them to kind of increase that. But I appreciate that times are tough and that companies won't do it unless they're kind of forced into it through government. So a tricky one, but I think there's a lot that we could be doing on that to improve it.
That's why I love doing these global ones, because when you start looking elsewhere, you realise, wait a minute, but there's so much more we can do. And we are doing it. Like you say, 1st of January, it is moving forward, nowhere near those levels, but it is going to make a difference in that way. Well, I think that's a place to end it. Thank you so much to my two guests, Cecilia Crossley and Dan Cohen. Had a wonderful time discussing all these elements around global sociological issues. We could talk all day. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to. We're going to move on. But I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Do subscribe. We're here every month sharing those bigger picture elements that you can then talk about with your clients, with your candidates, have those discussions and find out what they're doing and what impacts it's having. And you never know, you might just win a client out of that or a new candidate because of what you're doing. And that's what we're hoping to achieve. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again next month. We're on the T, global technology. Oh, a little bit to talk about then. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Hiring Happenings is the new podcast from Recruiting Gym, bringing you hiring news every month with a pestle twist.
Sponsored by Monster.